Now, to start this beginner's guide look at layers on the iPad, I'm going to be looking at the iPad help files but on my PC because I can get a bigger image and it can be seen better. Now this is the help file page about layers, so I'm going to have a quick read of this and sort of hopefully describe or talk about certain things. So we've got layers allow you to edit and design using non-destructive methodology and gives you maximum flexibility in your project. Now you can edit in two ways. You can edit destructively or non-destructively. Now destructively, for example, if you had an image and you just painted directly straight onto it and then you added other image sort of things to that picture, you are ruining that picture. So it would make it sort of difficult to go back and change something if something didn't go right. But if you edit non-destructively, those things that you add, like painting or filters or adjustments, if they're in layers, those layers can be deleted if you don't like them, or they can be altered if you don't like them. But your original layer image at the bottom will not be altered or affected, so you are not damaging it. So it is always best to edit non-destructively using layers where available. Now, next bit here has got what are layers. You can think of layers as being like a sheet of paper that are stacked one on top of the other. Transparent areas of the layers reveal the layer below, while opaque parts of the layer obscure the layers below. So if a layer has any sort of pixel on it, it will obscure something that is below it. So all layer management is carried out from the Layers Studio. Now in this sample image below here, the Layers Studio is the icon on the right just above that big white dot, which is the color, and it just looks like the stack of layers. So then we have, here are some important points regarding layers. Once editing and designing has begun, all documents will have at least one layer. So that will, so for example, in this example that's on here, if you open that image, which will be the very bottom layer, if you edited it destructively, you will always have one layer. But if you do it non-destructively, then you will have all these layers that are above it. The order of the layers is important. A layer at the top of the list is at the front of your document and vice versa. It's got any layer or layers are highlighted so they can always see what layer you are working on. So again in this sample below, it is the image layer at the bottom which is highlighted because it is a lighter color than the ones above it. And the last one is any layer can be hidden to exclude it from its contents from displaying in your project. And this is the little arrows that are on all of these layers. If you click on that little, not arrow, tick I should say, if you click on one of those ticks, it will turn that layer off and hide it, so you can see what your edit would look like without a certain adjustment added. Now the order of which these layers are in is also important, because again, in this sample here you've got the image layer at the bottom, and above it you have two grouped layers, which are these sort of bright white lights going along the side of the rails. Now if I click on this image, it will move that image layer above those two grouped layers, and you can see the difference because this image layer, because it is all solid pixels, will not allow you to see those two grouped layers. Let me just click on this, so you can see that image layer has now moved above those two grouped layers, and you can no longer see them because that is blocking the visibility of the layers below. So if I click on that again, it will move that back down, and you can now see the effect of those grouped layers. Now below this we have types of layers. There are several types of layers that can be created. You have pixel layers containing raster images where pixel based editing takes place. So it's basically just sort of, if you can start a new pixel layer and start painting on it or doing whatever you want to that. Image layers, self-contained placed images that retain the original image data including the color profile. Now you can hopefully see that in this bottom layer in this image here, it has the word pixel just above the name of the layer, so that tells you it is a pixel image. But an image layer can also be a pixel image, but it is sort of treated specially, sort of almost like a vector layer, and in that case it would have the word image next to its name rather than pixel. So there are some things that you can't do to an image layer, in which case you would have to rasterize that layer to make it a pixel layer. It does get slightly confusing, although image and pixel layers are sort of largely pixel layers, they are treated slightly differently. Next we have mask layers, which are special layers that allow you to define what contents is hidden to reveal the layer beneath. Now in these two grouped layers here, they have the sort of image, but next to them you have these, they were originally solid white layers, and these are the masks layers, and they've been painted black on them to hide certain areas that the person didn't want you to see, and the white areas that are still visible in this mask are the areas that he does want you to see. And if you look at the adjustment layers above it, what is it, there's 6 of them, all adjustments have a mask layer attached, and the 5th one up, which is HSL shift adjustment, he has painted black onto that to hide certain areas, and these areas will not be affected by that HSL shift, only the areas that are white. So you can attach layer masks to an image, or there are layer masks already added to adjustments. Next we have adjustment layers, special layers that can be used to correct or enhance the layer beneath. So like I said, we've got the 6 adjustment layers on this image above, and the adjustment studio icon is one of the ones coming down here on the right. Next we have fill layers. Now these are special layers that contain an adjustable solid or gradient color. So it basically says what it is on this description. You can add a solid color or a gradient layer. And below that we have vector layer. Now vector layers contents such as curves, shapes, text and placed images occur in their own unique layer. Now certain things will automatically be made into layers like text and what have you. If you add text, it will automatically add it as a vector layer, even if you've added it to you're trying to do it to a blank pixel layer. the program will make a new layer for that text. And then it's got here, vector layers are automatically created whenever you draw lines and shapes using the pen tool, use any geometric shape, like squares, triangles, what have you, add artistic or frame text, or use the place image command to add additional images to your project. So if you use place image, it will make it a vector layer, and like I said, it will come up in the description image rather than pixel. So that is a quick look at the help file. Now we'll sort of have a more practical demonstration on the iPad itself. Now I've moved from my PC onto the iPad, we're going to have a sort of a general look at some layers. Now I'm going to click on the plus sign at the top here, and I'm going to start a new document, and it doesn't overly matter what size I make this, but and it doesn't necessarily matter whether you start with a transparent background like I am going to do, or whether you start with the white background. So I've started with this transparent background document, but technically there is no layer there. That area that you see is just a representation of the document size. And if I open the layers panel, as you can see, there is technically no layer there yet. So this is just a visualization of the area that you are going to be working with. So if I open the assets manager and I say I drag on this, might help if I selected it, drag on this tree image, and then I will clip that to the canvas. So if I come to the layer menu, as you can see, we now do have a layer. It's called image, and this is because this is an image layer and not a pixel layer. So it is being treated like a vector layer rather than a pixel layer. I'm not 100% certain what things will not work with image layers. Now, I know there are some adjustments or something like that that won't work with image layers. So what you would need to do is click on the this is second icon here that looks like the layers icon, and click on rasterize, and that will change that from the image layer, and it's now called pixel. So it is now a pixel layer. So you could rename this. So if I double click on the pixel name, we can rename this, and it's not going to let me. Here we go. So we'll rename that tree and come back. As you can see, it is still named a pixel layer, but it is now called tree. So I'll come out of that one. So now that I've come back to the home page, I'm going to open up this sparrow image. Now this is an image I took myself, and if we have a look at the layers panel, it will be given the default name of background because it is the first layer and it doesn't have a name of its own, and as you can see, it is a pixel layer. Now if I come to the assets manager, studio, and I select one of these trees and drag it onto the image, when I go back to the layers panel, you can see we now have the two layers, the one which is at the bottom, which is the sparrow and is a pixel layer, and the one I've just added, which is an image layer. It doesn't have a name at the moment, but if I click on that more icon and then double click where it says image, I can rename this to tree, and when I go back, as you can see, we've got an image layer called tree and a pixel layer which is called background, which again I could rename to bird or sparrow, whatever. Now, because it is an image layer rather than a pixel layer, certain things can't be done to it, like we said previously. So if I wanted to do anything if I try something and it doesn't work, it is because it is an image layer. So you would then have to rasterize that particular layer. But what I am going to do is I'm going to add a mask to this tree, so a mask layer. And if I click on the plus sign up here, it's about the fourth or fifth down, we've got mask layer. I will click on that, and if I open up that little group, you can see that the mask, it is what is known as a child layer of the layer that it is attached to. Now, this means that it will only affect the layer that it is attached to. So anything I do to this mask layer will only affect the tree and not the image underneath. And the way to sort of demonstrate this is to get the paintbrush, and the colour needs to be black, which it is, and make sure that the mask layer is the layer that is highlighted, which it is. And then if I'm scrolling and clicking well outside the image here, and if I stop now, you can see I've not painted any black onto the sparrow image, and I have obscured where I painted on the tree image, so you can see the image behind it. And also, if you look at the mask, you can see there's now that black line where I painted. And if I sort of go across the other way, that mask will then have like the X on it, so you get a rough representation of what that mask is doing and what it looks like. So there, in that one example here, we've got a pixel layer, an image layer, and mask layers. If I highlight the tree layer and I now add a filter, what should we go for? Let's try a blur. So we'll go for a blur filter, and what we want is a Gaussian blur. And see, the assistant has rasterized the layer you previously had selected. So if I go back to this layer, the program has automatically changed the tree image from an image layer to a pixel layer, because it needs it to be a pixel layer for this to work. So it's just now a case of raising the blur radius with the controls at the bottom of the page, and as you can see, that has now blurred the tree image, but it hasn't blurred the image below, because it is only working on that layer, because that is the layer that was highlighted when I selected the filter. So if I then select an adjustment, and we, for example, let's try black and white, come back to the layers panel. We now have an adjustment layer. Now the adjustment layers will have the name that the adjustment is, so you always know what those adjustments are. So in this case it's black and white, but if it had been one of the other adjustments it would have that name, like HSL or what have you. So you know what all these white squares are and what by their name. Now again, like I said previously, that white square means that it is a mask. So you can paint black onto it and stop certain areas from being affected by that layer. Because if I again get the paintbrush tool, and we are still in black, and if I paint over this area here, so you can see that the colour is showing through the mask because I've painted black onto the mask to stop that black and white effect in that area. I'm just going to click on the undo, so we've gone back to being full black and white. But if I only want this to affect the tree image and not the bird image, I would have to tap on the adjustment and hold down, and then just drag it down until there is that blue line going across. And when I let go, that will now be a child layer of the tree. And as you can see, only the tree image is black and white, and the bird image is still in colour. If I select that tree image and the move tool, I could move that around, and the masks will move with it because they are all sort of child layers of the main layer. So that is, I think, as far as I need to go at this moment in time, looking at the layers. So we've looked at pixel layers, image layers, and adjustment layers and mask layers. So hopefully I will sort of look at it a bit more in depth later on, but for now, thank you for watching and goodbye.